Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Today we continue with the Michael Cottingham lecture on herbal remedies, herbal nutrition, how to identify and use the plants that are all around you, most of which you believe are no good. Probably would dig them up and throw them away, not realizing the tremendous nutritional and medicinal value contained therein. This lecture took place on May the 27th, 1998, at our annual conference at the Thunder Horse Ranch. Please pay attention, take notes, and you'll be amazed at what you're going to learn.
In fact, if you go to the pharmacy, look at poison ivy remedies. Half the poison ivy remedies out there contain tannic acid, 40% tannic acid, and those heavy astringents will first of all, they'll destroy the oils of poison ivy, and they'll help to dry them up. So you can use oak bark tea to bathe poison ivy infections and totally destroy the poison ivy. And jewelweed, for those who know jewelweed is famous for poison ivy. It's back on the East Coast. Jewelweed is the most well known for almost wherever poison ivy grows back east. There's always jewelweed nearby. It's like it works really quick. It's like that's probably the best of all the poison ivy remedies. And then oak bark or tannic acid, cleavers or bed straw. And sometimes even cactus, prickly pear cactus, the inner juice of the cactus. Cactus juice itself, we'll talk about prickly pear when we're outside, but prickly pear, if you take a pad and cut it in half and lay it on inflammation, burns, or insect bites, things of that nature, cactus juice is hypotonic. It sucks. It draws. It is a great poultice. It will draw out infection, and will draw out and break down oils and irritants of the skin. So that's the answer to her poison ivy question.
Before you go any farther, we were talking about the kind of the lemon and the orange and everything. We have a recipe that we take when we have a cold or something like that, and it's one lemon, one grapefruit, and one orange, not peeled. The peeling seeds and everything that we cut up, and then we put in a half an onion, 6 cloves of garlic, and 2 drops of peppermint oil. It tastes terrible, but it really works.
Oh, that's a powerhouse recipe. Yeah, that would kill and knock out just about anything. You got alkaloids, you got essential oils, you've got nauseation, you've got lots of stuff going on there. Onion and garlic? Okay. I've seen friends just take onions and just coming down with a cold, eat an onion and go for a run. That's pretty, just sweat and just the onions themselves are antibacterial and really good at causing stimulation. And they have, they're alliums, so they have stuff very similar to garlic, not as potent as garlic, but, very close in some of the antibacterial, onions are good, if you can stand the taste and the aspect of them. But the last, we started talking about bitters, and bitters, even though we have a digestive herb in there, the catnip and the fennel and peppermint, bitters, just bringing bitters back into your life, the bitter taste, the missing taste. I'll tell you some of the problems that you can affect positively by taking bitters. By bringing that missing taste back into your life, you can improve digestion, you can improve upper GI function, which means you automatically improve lower upper intestinal tract function, which means you can affect the skin. You can help to clear up skin problems, which means you can really, by bringing, I've seen of all the substances to affect allergies, by bringing bitters back into one's diet, you can affect upper respiratory, allergy-related congestive problems more than anything else, because you improve the burner, you improve the furnace, and you also improve the elimination of waste, the ashes, the aftermath of the burner. The upper GI is like a big furnace, but if you only partially burn the material and you don't eliminate it and it sits there, you essentially congest everything, and as a result, a lot of peripheral problems begin.
Is cilantro considered a bitter?
Cilantro is slightly bitter, not a heavy bitter, but I would consider cilantro if you were going to do light, medium, and heavy bitters, cilantro would be kind of on the light to medium side. Not a heavy bitter, not even a real powerful bitter, but it has bitter aspects. The Chinese are really good at classifying foods and medicines they give, and not only can a plant have a sour and a bitter aspect, like limes or lemons, they both can be sour, sweet, and bitter. I can't think of any plants out there. I know there was one, I've forgotten at the moment, but there was only one plant out there that had all five of the tastes. And to me, I thought that this was a plant to start to look more into and research, because it met all the criteria of the five tastes. The Chinese are very good at saying, like ginger. Ginger is classified as salty, slightly bitter, acrid. It has the acrid, bitter, and sour and sweet. I think ginger had four of the five. It didn't have salt. It didn't have the aspect of salt of the five tastes. Ginger was the one, I think they had four of the five. But anyways, Chinese are really good at breaking down plants and foods and giving them the bitter, salty, sour, sweet, acrid attributes that give them an understanding to practitioners.
Ginger or ginseng? What's the ginseng?
Ginseng is a totally different plant than ginger. The question was, what's the difference between ginger or ginseng? Ginseng is an entire different genus, entire different species than ginger. The root is, people use both the root of ginger root and the root of ginseng. Ginseng is classified, there's a whole classification of herbs called adaptogens. And the adaptogens are sometimes very hard to get a handle on. Adaptogens, to give you an idea of what an adaptogen, how ambiguous it is, but yet what it can do. Adaptogens, for people who are, say, hot, fiery, super excess, and this hot, fiery, super excess constitution is driving them out of balance, a ginseng will pull them back to the balance point. If another person is cold, sluggish, slow metabolism, ginseng will fire them up and bring them back to the balance point. Very mysterious, hard to get a handle. That's why they call them adaptogens. You're extreme in this area, but they pull you back to the balance point. And if you're excess or deficient, they pull you back to the balance point. They adapt you back to homeostasis. And how they work is a great mystery. The Chinese probably have the best understanding of adaptogens. Licorice is considered an adaptogen. All the ginsengs are considered adaptogenic. They're balancing. It doesn't matter if you're excess or if you're deficient, they will pull you back. They will strengthen you by curtailing your excessiveness or your deficiency. That's what a kind of an adaptogen. Ginseng is an adaptogen. Ginger is not. Ginger is a straightforward, aromatic, circulatory, chemically, it's a very mechanical, straightforward herbal medicine. You take ginger root, because it has aromatic oils, it dilates, it irritates, it stimulates. Herbal irritation is not necessarily detrimental. It's stimulating, The fact that you drink ginger tea and it makes you hot and sweaty could be called an irritant, but it's also why you take ginger root tea. Ginseng doesn't do that. Ginger will work immediately. Ginsengs take time, weeks, months, years. And you may never notice the effect, or you may one day say, I haven't been sick in 3 or 4 years. And it could be the ginseng, and that's how adaptogens work. Sometimes, there is an adaptogen, it's called Eleutherococcus. It's Siberian ginseng. It's not a true ginseng. Eleuthero is the genus, or Eleutherococcus is the genus, and it's really good for people who, I would say like my constitution, thin, hot, fiery. They eat, their food is digested instantly. They just burn, process, and they're adrenaline excess constitutions. And they tend to be like Roman candles, boom, 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 collapse. When they get sick, they collapse, and they have to rebuild their energy supply. And that's an adrenaline excess constitution. Siberian ginseng and all those ginsengs actually cool down the adrenal glands and bring them down, to a more stable point. So they're not burning as hot. And that's a really good tool. The Siberian ginseng is really good for a majority of people in here who may be running hot, active, reading, working, doing this, teaching, and just their adrenaline excess. They're fiery, they're moving. And when they get sick, they collapse. They just break. And they have to rebuild and then come back and do it all cyclic. And adrenaline excess people usually gravitate towards quantities of coffee, nicotine. They like stimulation. They like work. They like to keep busy. They like to keep going. They don't like to go to sleep until they lay down and they pass out. That's adrenaline excess type stuff. That's a good one. So bitters. Bitter plants would be the number 10 herb because bitters are the missing taste. They provide a stimulation for the upper and lower GI. They can do more for so many different peripheral problems, like skin problems. Eczema, psoriasis can be cleared up because a lot of eczema and psoriasis is distinctly dietary related. If you're congested and stuck down here and not burning and metabolizing and eliminating, you'll see it in the skin because the liver governs the skin, and the liver is the main organ up here in the upper GI. So if the liver is deficient, cold, sluggish, you'll see problems in the skin. The skin is the largest organ system in the body, but it doesn't do anything. It's not self-governing. It needs to be governed by the kidneys and the liver.
Does that help get rid of that?
Absolutely. People often come into the herb store and they say, what do you have for weight loss? What do you have for... And I say, bitters. Bitters, they're the most... They will improve your metabolism. They will improve your usage of fuel. They will really improve your elimination of waste. They can clear up sinus problems. They can clear up respiratory problems. They can help with gallstone formations. They can touch upon all of the standard American affluent, just the standard American diet that we all have actually come out of. Some of us, at 27, I was a McDonald's Twinkie coming out of that world. And it's now 37. It's like I eat so much better than I did at 27. At 47, hopefully I've curtailed many of the habits and eat even better. I mean, it's a progressive thing, but running away from the standard American diet as much as possible, occasionally going back to reminisce. And, I mean, how can you totally change your personal constitution and eliminate those flavors and cravings? It's not easy unless you go to some Zen monastery somewhere and totally reorganize your cellular structure from the top down.
The problem with McDonald's, though, you never really know what you're eating.
More than the calories, the food content, and the nutritional value, I worry about. Hepatitis is too prevalent to be eating out all the time. You travel, we compromise. I always think when we travel or we go to restaurants, immediately the moment you walk into a restaurant, you have to compromise. You've accepted the compromise. You can demand, at certain restaurants, you can demand certain protocol and standards be raised a little bit. But I always feel bad if I'm with some friend who turns out to be, tries to revolutionize. He wants his food cooked this way and this way. And please don't use no MSG and all this. And I'm like, okay, some of them will listen to you, some of them will respect you, but, the bottom line is you've walked into the restaurant, you've accepted the compromise, because unless you cook your own food, unless you control that 100%, anything less than that, anything less than growing all your own food and controlling it is a compromise. And so we have to accept those compromises when we have our food and such. How often would you recommend a person eat a Circle K hot dog, slowly roasted for many hours, to their blistering with, they have cancer sores on the skin of the hot dog from eating that rotisserie thing? In that case, the compromise is great, so maybe once every 5 years or so. You're better off going to find some real 100% all beef hot dogs and cooking them up at your own home and using whole wheat organic buns and organic. I mean, you can tailor the compromise. No tofu, please. No tofu pups. You're going to eat a hot dog. Eat a real freaking hot dog. 100% beef. You're going to eat tofu. Get a block of tofu, cut it up, and don't try to pretend turkey dogs, chicken dogs. I mean, I'm talking for myself. I'm talking to Ren here. We have this tofu is really, a communist thing, I think.
Just kind of along that humor, driving across Phoenix, we pulled into a gas station. They had a big ad. Please come in for a blippy pie.
Get your blippy pie here.
The door, get and go, they call those places. Get and go. Stop and get. Yeah.
Could you list some more bitters for us?
Absolutely. More bitter substances. Hops. Actually, it's not out of the question to drink a little bit of beer before you eat a dark Guinness stout, a really bitter beer. Medicinal. I'm not talking about a six-pack. I'm talking about the darkest. Not a six-pack before you sit down to eat. But let me tell you, if you eat bitters before you sit down to eat, you will be ravenously hungry. You will digest your food. You will eliminate your waste. You will actually feel like you could eat a 10-course meal. But if you did a nice dose of bitters beforehand, you won't feel that congested, bloated state. And as a result, hops, beer, dark beer can be, or hops, the herb, can be another one of the bitters.
Is it still a time to go bathroom that I can do all that?
I think so.
It's not like it's really quick.
It's not that quick. Unless you have what's called an excessive upper gas colon. Most people have a deficiency. There are occasionally some people who eat and immediately, they just set down the fork, they finished eating, and they have to go and evacuate. Those people don't have the standard American deficient upper GI. They have the excessive. They are just too juicy, too quick, and they evacuate, and they usually probably don't have hard stools. They usually have stools of maple or oak. Now, they usually have more of a diarrhea type of constitution. They're quick. They eat their food, they digest it, they dump it. They also have the problem of not absorbing enough nutrients, and they have malabsorption problems. They need to cool down.
They need to go eat a oak tree or something?
They need to use more of the cooling herbs, more like slippery elm or the mallows or the marshmallows. They just need to slow down their juices, their gastric secretions. But that's just one out of 10,000 people. Occasionally we all get that. This is very important. Remember that, when I teach, we're not going in depth on constitutional medicine, but when I teach constitutional medicine, I also reinforce more than ever before that we can have and we can bounce back and forth between different types of constitutional profiles depending on what we're doing. We can be predominantly deficient, cold, sluggish, but occasionally we can be excess due to maybe some stress for a week or two. And so our constitution shifts a little bit, but it usually comes back to that same constant pattern. And also, so our constitutions can vary a little bit, so you might have to tailor your formulas. And remember, by the age of 30, for sure, maybe the age of 40 for some people, you know where you're sick. You know what ails you. You know your patterns of illness. And a very key concept, a secret to longevity is by the age of 30, we know our patterns of illness. It really behooves us to recognize them and find the tools to support our weaknesses, both our inherited and our environmentally acquired weaknesses. Because by the age of 30, if a virus is going around, you know where it's going to hit you. You know your patterns of illness. So when you start to look for answers, say, I need to find tools to strengthen these weaknesses. You will help yourself to become less diseased. These weak, inherited, environmentally acquired weak areas will become less troublesome, and you will live longer as a result of that. So constitutions can vary. You know your patterns of illness. It's really, this information I've given you, a lot of this can help to strengthen. Each one of us out here has weak livers, strong livers, weak kidneys, strong kidneys. We have excesses, deficiencies, strong points, and weak points. We know it by now, all of us. And
how about parasites, flukes, things? Did you ever get into that stuff?
Parasites, flukes. Well, absolutely. It's a whole other area that, like we talked about black walnut being good as an amoeba, good for some parasites. Actually, there's a plant where we go out here after dinner. Some of the wormwood I'll mention about being a really good anti-parasitic amoeba-orientated plant. And when I'm talking about that, maybe mention a few more plants along those lines. Bitters. I'll get back to bitters and get into the viruses. The bitters, hops, Oregon grapefruit. Oregon grapefruit is a real famous bitter. And a real famous bitter in European herbal medicine is a plant called gentian. G-E-N-T-I-A-N. Purple gentian or just gentian. It's one of the major components of Swedish bitters. Gentian is very bitter, very, secreting oriented. It's very stimulating to this, to the upper GI.
Well, you're going to talk about having a beer before dinner or something like that, as a bitter.
A beer, the dark beers, because they contain hops and they contain generous amounts of dark, rich, bitter hops.
I think the distinction should be made between dark American beers and dark foreign beers, or dark beers that stick to the old tradition of beer making, because for the most part, American beer is not beer. You're not going to get any help out of that.
Absolutely.
Unless it's some small brewery like Anchor Steam in San Francisco or something that sticks to the real tradition of really making real beer.
And in fact, the only dark beer I can think of I would consider medicinal is the Guinness Dark. Mad stuff's not my bag. It's a dark, horrible, bitter tasting, but medicinal-wise, it's perfect as a bitter cordial before meals to stimulate digestion. Half bottle, a whole beer before you sit down and eat. Of the dark ale. I don't know of any American dark ales similar to Guinness at all.
When it comes to beer, there's no American anything. It's all Czech.
I have a friend who's doing a book. Actually, and it's fascinating. He got into some of the libraries in Europe, looking at the 15th and 16th century herbals, and we were talking about herbal beers. And he found some hidden and suppressed information that it looked like at one time during the Reformation and the Great Schism and all. So the herbal beers became suppressed, but they were making beers with things like yarrow and hops, and they were not making them as beverages for intoxication, even though they were beers. They were making them medicinal because they were, in a sense, making extracts. Some of the first herbal extracts, but using the alcohol beer format. And he was coming across incredible information and usages and how these medicinal beers were actually impacting illness for a long time until the great religious suppressions took place in Europe and a lot of the herbals disappeared unless they were saved in libraries.
How long before you eat?
A key things, some people like bitters after meals. It's really, I think, the majority of herbalists and clinical herbalists would suggest that bitters are best done 20 to 30 minutes before you eat. To really get secretions going, to really set the stage, so that when you sit down, your mouth is moist, your stomach has been waiting and is ready, and gastric secretions have taken place. So anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, I think, is realistic to take a shot of bitters extract, or to chew on some bitter plants, or make a cup of bitter tea, or drink a Guinness Stout. And think about it in terms of the importance of the fact that it's the missing taste. It really, when I stumbled upon this little Chinese book and was reading this, and I thought, my God, this is another missing piece of the great puzzle. It's like, absolutely, the standard American diet does not consist of any bitter substances. And boom, you bring bitters in, and after thousands of people, you start to see what this little taste that's been missing really can mean. It's phenomenal. I mean, if any of you out there suffer from upper respiratory or allergy-related problems, try bitters. If you've got extra weight and you have a slow metabolism and you feel constipated and congested in your upper and lower GI, try bitters. If you have hemorrhoids or varicose veins or slow, sluggish lymph system, and it's all because of your digestion, try bitters.
Most bartenders have a little bottle of stuff called bitters. I don't know anything about it because I don't know. I never drank anything that they used it in. What is that?
Absolutely. What do they call it? Angostura or Angostura bitters. In New Mexico, it was real famous to make Osha bitters, or take some of the bitter herbs, even chaparral bitters. Take some of the bitter herbs, and stick them in a little whiskey, so that in the bars, when you drank your shot of whiskey and you're complaining and feeling nauseous, that the bartenders used to give out bitters to clear that stagnation or that liver stress. Bitters, and actually, believe it or not, I don't know if it really happens much, but people used to come in after a restaurant, if the restaurant doesn't serve it, or coming off of work, and actually drink bitters before they went home. Not drink beer or not drink whiskey. They'd go into a bar, ask for a shot of bitters, sit and talk, drink the bitters, and go home. And by the time they got home, they were really hungry. And that was really big with some of the Italian communities, and some of the real bitters were real big coming out of Europe, and they came, and somehow people just lost interest in bitters. Bitters were ugly tasting. Bitters were bad. But there's a lot of bitter. You can go to good liquor stores and buy bitters from all over the world, and they're meant to be used before meals, or people sit around and drink some bitters afterwards. Because some people don't like bitters before meals; they like them after meals. It's maybe 1 out of 10 people respond better to bitters afterwards. But most of them were done beforehand. Just like the bitter salads of traditional green salads didn't have salad dressings. They were dandelion greens. They were bitter greens. They were eaten before the big, sauerkraut and sausage and big loaves of rye bread. The big heavy meals always were, bitter salads preceded the big heavy meals in a lot of cultures. And bitters are very important.
You keep in mind, somewhere in your discussion, the concept of the oscillators or the zappers, the concept of electrical stimulus to kill off gas bugs in your body. Familiar with some of that? In addition to maybe some of the herbs and things you respond to?
I'm not sure. You mean we're talking electrolytes or
actual electrical stimulus or oscillation?
External, using electricity, and
he's talking about these guys that some of these New Age and other type shows where you go and you hold these two things and they give you a certain charge and it's supposed to kill all the parasites in your body. I don't think there's any substantiation for that.
Yeah, and I've never had any first. I do remember some of the old materia medicas mentioning, they broke rainwater, they broke water down into 20, 30 different categories: pond water, rainwater, river water, swamp water, water hitting a tin roof, falling into an oak barrel. And I also noticed, I've never really read or studied it, but, you know, electricity was a big electrical, you know, therapy, and they had it broken down for a whole variety of illnesses. And I think what worries me, I don't know the validity, I don't really know anything about that. I think what really worries me about electricity is the electromagnetic fields that surround us through in cities, just the power lines. I mean, there's the obvious studies that show power lines really do some weird activity and tumors and neurological stress. And I wouldn't be surprised tumors and neurological stress, and I wouldn't be surprised that some small amounts of electricity do some beneficial things, but I don't know anything about bacterial.
The concept was certain frequencies affect certain types of parasites. And
you're talking about radio frequencies.
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about now. A friend who had gone to Germany says the Germans really have perfected this to the point that it's really, and in fact they use these radio waves, these frequencies in conjunction with acupuncture, are getting phenomenal results with viruses and bacteria. And this is what he says. He's like, he always brings me information on ultraviolet work, ozone work, and, you know, I listen and I read the stuff. And I'm just, you know, I'm just a country, I'm just an herbalist in a small town. I like plants. There are people more qualified to do those really exotic. I'm glad they're doing it because, you know, plants do have their limitations.
The guy who started doing that, they threw him in prison. They got him, threw him in jail. And he was talking about problems with the pancreas, created by other things, the liver problems. It's fascinating. I didn't know if it's true or not. It sounded like
I've been hearing it from shadow sources, you know, people who bring back exotic information to me about, you know, their trips and travels, and so there might be. And then, the Germans are really, they developed they developed ozone, they developed some major stuff, and, you know, of course it's a different country that allows for, you know, more progressive experimentation and legitimacy. So I don't know, that's about all I know. I've been hearing stuff about it.
Be a little more precise when you ask a question, because I don't know what you're talking about. He asked about electricity zappers.
Yes.
Quite different from a royal right.
I know that was a big oscillation, but I wasn't sure if it was a stimulus or if it was a radio broadcast.
Yeah, I've been hearing this radio frequency oriented.
I don't know it, right? Generators.
Right.
We get a lot of research on it, and I guess they really did get rid of that because he's not on other things. But he had different frequencies listed for different things. Really fascinating.
Well, there's a lot. I'm going to get back to bitters, but the shamans who sing songs, they're you take ayahuasca and there's chemical compounds that cause neural opening, but in order to actually induce visions and hallucinations, historical ones that everybody participates in the same vision, they've got the chemical openings there, but what happens is the shamans are singing these thousands-of-year-old songs at a cicada-like frequency. And there's been a lot of research showing that the songs, once you're taking the chemicals that are doing the neurological manipulation, that the frequency causes the same group of people to see the same, vision. And it's a very similar, coming in from the jungles, but a very similar concept. But those frequencies definitely affect. The universe is kind of very frequency oriented, and we're part of the universe, from the molecules on up. Hops, Oregon grape, chaparral is a bitter, but it's very heavy duty. It's so powerful. You might want to put a small little bit of chaparral in a formula. Gentian, hops, Oregon grape. There's a lot of bitters. Dandelion greens, a lot of plants are medium bitters. You taste them and you can deal with it, but they don't say bitter. They just kind of say, slightly bitter, and you drink it. Bitters like gentian, Oregon grape, and hops say bitter, and you go bitter. And they really, they are extreme medicinal taste. Golden seal was always a classic bitter, but golden seal I don't recommend because it's endangered, threatened, overused, overpriced, and little hard on the liver. What was that bitter? Ginseng root, so many. I mean, just orange peel, grapefruit. Actually, not. Grapefruit is a good bitter if it's unsweetened, and grapefruit rind is extremely bitter and very good, very like ginseng orientated. And just a little side note, I found for people who are forming gallstones, a little thing to consider is maybe eating an unsweetened grapefruit first thing in the morning when you wake up. It's bitter, it's acidic, it's very stimulating to the breakdown and breaking down and then helping the gallbladder evacuate the formation of the precipitates that end up actually forming the gallstones themselves. And the reason why it's working is it's bitter. Bitter substances actually also, and here's another side thing with bitters, bitter substances can help people with adult onset diabetes because adult onset diabetes actually can originate because their upper GI has gone to hell, shot in a handbasket or whatever cliche. It's stagnant, stuck. And by taking bitters back in and getting the gallbladder, liver, pancreas juicing, formatting, breaking down sugars, eliminating, they can start to get a dietary bitter control over their diabetes. Phenomenal. Most of the really good diabetic medicines out of the Mexican herbal tradition, which the rest of the world really doesn't know, but they're phenomenal, is a plant called Burkhallia grandiflora, or Burkhallia californica. And this plant actually is so bitter. I mean, it's really hard for most people, nauseatingly bitter. But it's one of the great gallbladder, diabetic, bitter digestive stimulating medicines that there is. And sometimes people have gallbladder problems and diabetes because originally, peeling back the problems, their digestion slowed down, metabolism became non-existent, waste elimination, and their gallbladder problems, their diabetes originated because they didn't have the bitters in their diet. And I mean, their bitters can touch upon the lower GI, colitis, diverticulitis, irritable bowel syndrome, hemorrhoids, varicose veins, prostate congestion. A lot of prostate problems are really a dietary problem, especially for a lot of sedentary, standard American diet males. No exercise, very sedentary. I mean, turning the TV on or reaching over, looking for the remote is the greatest exercise that they do. On their hands and knees looking for the remote. Whereas if they start to break a sweat after 5 minutes, I'm sorry, it's just but just bring bitters back in. Be amazed. Be really amazed. You can lose weight, you can improve breathing, you can improve skin quality, improve and if you have more of the more serious problems like diabetes and gallstones and you can actually approach them with something that's been missing from the standard American diet for decades now.
They need a remote that beeps too, by the way.
Remote that beeps or
you just laugh there,
they probably have that. They probably have a remote that. You need a remote that when you let it go, it just floats over to a holding place on the wall or something. No matter where you set it down, it just goes back to the same place. But that's top 10 reference points for you to go back to, read about, learn on your own and such, and research a little bit. If you spend an hour learning a little bit more about those top 10, that's 10 hours, but if you do it over a year's time, you'd be phenomenal. Those 10 herbs will address hundreds of different problems. And I tell you, the bitter thing is really amazing. Bitters are phenomenal.
Michael, when you talk about the orange peel and the grapefruit rind, how much of that would you have to eat?
It doesn't take much bitters to stimulate. It could be just small amounts. Or you could literally make an extract from orange peel or grapefruit rind. Make an extract, and then take 5-10 drops of it in some water. And don't try to hide bitters. Don't try to put it in Kool-Aid or put it in other teas. Bitters require that you taste them. The medicine value, the explosion, is right here. There's no way around it. You can't put it in capsules and get the benefit. You can't put it in enemas. You have to taste it. It has to be bitter. It's got to be bitter, and you've got to experience it. And after, here's one thing that I noticed. Not everyone's like this, but a lot of people who really need bitters, actually, they say, that's not bitter. It's interesting. They end up saying, I love that taste. They crave it. They just innately comes, they want that. And it's not bitter to them. In time, when they've taken it long enough, it becomes bitter. It seems like a balance thing starts to take place, and actually the taste changes. It doesn't happen all the time. It's something. Just bring some bitters back in. You know what they are. You don't find them at the grocery store. You'll either have to pick them or make them, or you will in the peels, the rinds, like the oranges and the citrus. Those things are pretty bitter. Those are pretty good. You want something that's bitter that causes you to salivate, and if you do that on a regular basis, at least 15 to 30 minutes before your real big meals. You don't have to do it all the time, but if you're a bacon, eggs, pancakes, grit, coffee type of breakfast person, you might want to do bitters. If you're the steak and potato, 2 servings of steak type of person for dinner, you definitely want to do bitters before. Heavy foods require bitters. To just get, especially when we get older. Let's be honest. Our digestion falls apart. Things don't digest. Our metabolism. Bitters can become one of the great companions for aging digestive problems. And of all the things addressing standard American diet, bitters have done more help, more beneficial things for people than anything else. Anybody have the time? 5:30. Okay. Well, let's start. I want to talk about some herbs. We'll talk about more of them after dinner, the same ones. We can continue and carry it on outside, which is real nice as we're walking around. It'll be really nice out there. Let's talk about viruses. Let's talk about we know antibiotics work for bacterial problems. We know, we just hear more and more. We got this big fat book in the car about emerging viruses, and I can bring it in. You can write down the author. Some of you may have read it. We haven't read it in its entirety. I've skimmed through it, read a little bit, and it just confirms. I think we all can agree that some viruses have been made and released, and there's some evil aspects behind some viruses. I think I don't have to bring it in and read excerpts from the World Health Organization and how they have said that they should make viruses to curtail the world's population. I think we all know that. So why elaborate? Let's talk about plants that are important for viruses. I personally have seen viruses in my patients and in my community change. I've seen viruses go to the point where they are mutating in the human body. No longer do they just hit a weak area that's your inherited and environmentally acquired weak area, your stomach. Most people catch a virus in the stomach. Some people catch it in the lungs, sinuses, lower intestinal tract. Viruses, classically, from what I have saw empirically, is that they hit your weak area and you continuously acquire them in this weak area. I've watched the viruses. The last virus that hit the West Coast work its way through and talk to people all over, saw enough people in town, talk to the medical profession people, and correlate this and it builds up and builds up. I saw a virus for the first time act like 2 or 3 viruses at the same time. Go in, hit the head, hit the lungs, hit the stomach, hit the intestinal tract, stop working for 2 or 3 days, clear it up, and come right back and do the same thing. Now, is it another virus that's floating around? The person just, maybe, but when it's the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, 15th person in the small community that almost verbatim explain their symptoms, I'm like, wait a minute, something's going on here. They had the same rundown. They cleared up for the 2 to 3 day period, and it came right back again. I don't know what that means. I know it's the first time I've ever seen it. And I'm also watching some of these people, it hasn't left since January. And that's me. And these aren't people that catch colds. And these are people that are eating organic foods. These are people that are diligent. These are people that know a lot of this, what we're talking about. And they still, 5 months later, still have that virus bouncing back and forth in their body. I have to wonder, with all the, tidbits of conspiratorial, it's not even a conspiracy. I mean, it's a plan. It's a distinct plan. I think it's a mixture of three things. It's a distinct plan to curtail the world's population. I think it's inadequate buffoons who don't know how to deal with science, and an element of greed by the big pharmaceutical companies. So you have a distinct plan that's mismanaged, and the main motive for some of them is a greed factor, a vaccine factor. And what you end up with chaos, and what you end up with is viruses. And I don't care, I don't care if they're being made in a lab somewhere. I believe there's an element of truth to that, a distinct element of truth. There's enough evidence to support that. But what appears to me is that viruses are uncontrollable, have a mind of their own, have an agenda of their own, which is to perpetuate, reproduce, survive, mutate, adapt, and to use the human body as their source of, as their playground, as their perpetual energy factory to cultivate until they kill the organism, and then they move on. So they kill you and they move on. So if there's manipulation and genetically engineering on killer viruses, and they really get out of control, what in the world are we going to do? I mean, there are no medicines. And I'll tell you, vaccines have a dismal history of success. I mean, contamination, purposely contaminated, accidentally contaminated, side effects, unknown risks, even today, of what vaccines are doing in our body. From the initial polio to the initial smallpox, etc., etc. When do we know? We won't know. We don't know what vaccines are doing. They're really, I think they do save lives initially, obviously on the surface, but in the long run, I really have a fear vaccines are really compromising the immune system. And really, if you've got just some evil aspects to it, it wouldn't be hard to compromise the immune system through vaccines. So you think about it. You see viruses, and you may even experience illness yourself, getting sicker for longer periods of time, just getting over it, and getting sick again. You may start to notice that this is reoccurring more frequently. You may notice that people hear more words like hospitalization, death, strep, staph, mutation, antibiotics not working, viruses mutating, all these different clandestine black ops, the stuff about AIDS, Ebola, the green monkeys. All this adds up to something like there's some viral activity to be very wary of and fearful of. And I don't know, without being stressed, paranoid, excessively Howard Hughes orientated, washing hands and putting yourself in a isolated situation. It's not feasible for us. I think we have to find and develop tools. I gave you a lot of the tools already. I told you about water, staying away from chlorinated water. I told you about organic food. And these are kind of some foundational things. Believe it or not, bringing bitters back into your life will improve your immune system immensely. That in itself is a roundabout tool to fight viruses. And I told you about one of the foundational herbs of it was red root for the lymph system. You've got to learn this plant. You've got to understand the importance of red root and its electrically recharging of the cell walls, and how it can be the pivotal center, it can be the heart of any formula, especially an antiviral formula. Some of the herbs to consider, some of them you're not going to know, some of them you may want to learn. I would suggest that you write them down as reference points, because these are plants that I have seen work for very serious viruses that, there's no other place to turn. Where are you going to turn? Allopathic medicine has no medicine for you when you get a virus. When I caught hepatitis A, and I went down, I told some of you the story, I went down, I got my blood work done to see what hepatitis I had. And you know what the doctor there recommended to me? The head nurse practitioner, Dr. Dorothy, said, now, don't forget to take your milk thistle. That's all they had to offer, was what I taught them 4 years earlier, was that you treat hepatitis with milk thistle because it's a very distinct antiviral. anti-inflammatory for the liver, specifically for hepatitis. It was great. It felt good for the head nurse practitioner to say, now take your milk thistle. They don't have anything for viral hepatitis. They don't have anything for viruses as a consequence. It really behooves you, and really, I can't stress the importance of all the things in the herb world, of all the things that I fear that are emerging, all the tidbits and things I've heard. I do believe viruses are going to come, and they're going to ravage, and they're going to be of detriment to millions and millions of people. I think it's 1917, 1918. Here's a great illustration. The great influenza epidemic. It killed 20 million people worldwide, mostly because World War I was going on. They were transporting people all over the planet for the government. World War I really pushed people all over the planet for the first time in a major way. I mean, people from all over the world going and bringing things back. In New Mexico, this was what first dawned. It dawned to me the importance of viruses and herbal medicine. There was no doctors of any consequence in the state of New Mexico at the turn of the century. Maybe a half dozen in the entire state. Population wasn't that immense. Very few doctors. The influenza, you can go to most cemeteries and look. 1917, 1918, the height of the influenza epidemic that killed 20 million people worldwide. You can go to small villages and see entire cemeteries with that date. Entire villages of people, small little hamlets, small towns around Taos, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, entire towns died from that influenza virus. And do any of you remember that they just went to Alaska not too long ago and dug up a frozen corpse in the tundra and went into the chest to retrieve that 1918 virus that killed 20 million people? They went to Alaska to a cemetery, dug up a frozen corpse, and found the active influenza virus from the turn of the century and brought it back out because they wanted to develop a vaccine. This was about 3 months at the most, 2 to 3 months ago. I'm like, it was right around the bird flu time, what a coincidence, But anyways, you know what saved a lot of villages? They had no doctors, was a plant called OSHA. Ligusticum porteri, OSHA, powerful antiviral, and really has an emphasis on viruses that affect the lungs. So I'm not making this up. They used this at the turn of the century to save their families. The Mexican people in New Mexico used 2 herbs. They used OSHA root because it was a powerful antiviral and a very good bronchial dilator. And they used another plant called immortal, I-N-M-O-R-T-A-L, immortal. It's Asclepias asperillo. It's a milkweed family member. And they used that plant because it is one of the best medicines for pumping the lungs dry when you have fluid that's building up. So they used immortal and they used OSHA root together to keep the influenza fluids from building up in the lungs, keeping the heart, the kidneys, and the lungs pumping and filtering. And they used the OSHA root as the antiviral. And that was the only thing that saved many towns and villages in New Mexico. And the 90-year-old people can tell you the story in New Mexico in the small rural areas. This took place. They used herbal medicine to save their towns and villages against the most ravaging virus to ever hit the world. 20 million people died worldwide in a very short couple years. Not like the AIDS that may kill millions of people over God knows how long. This killed 20 million people over a 2 to 3 year period. And they used 2 herbs in New Mexico and probably used herbs elsewhere if you got into the herbal traditions. If you looked in China, if you looked in South America, if you looked in Europe, you probably would find that they had antiviral herbs that the folk people treated their soldiers, treated their villages with herbs that were antiviral because there was no other medicine on the face of the earth. You either used herbs or you innately survived because you were just lucky and had a strong immune system and you didn't get the full force of the virus before you died. And
have they used immortal on the Hunter virus?
I don't. Today, I don't think so. Have they used immortal for the Hunter virus? I would. there's no doubt, it's a very pulmonary orientated virus. I would use some of these I would use my antiviral formula. But if I saw a virus hitting a specific area, there's one thing about like an antiviral formula or using antiviral herbs. They're great antiviral by nature, but if you notice the virus starting to hit a certain organ systems like the lungs, you've got to bring in pulmonary herbs. And immortal, which is a milkweed plant, is a very important plant because, immortal in the Mexican herbal tradition and in my tradition and those who know of it is known as one of the great medicines for congestive heart failure. Some of the early signs of congestive heart failure is edema, shortness of breath, fatigue. By 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you got to take a nap. Your lungs always have some fluid in it. You have swelling. You're not urinating properly. What you end up with is you're retaining fluids. You're literally beginning to drown and fill up with fluids because you have congested heart. Your heart is not pumping and meeting respiration and diuretic action.
And that's it for today, folks. Good night, and God bless each and every single one of you.
On the air tonight, and it's on a coast to coast look up. Love is everywhere tonight. We better look to go to get no tongue. Each station throughout the nation will have a song coming through. So if you're network, the major network will fill your home for you. You should never sing for her if the song is not of your alley.
You might sound like green to her.
I suppose she likes Rudy Valley. It's so good, someone shouts to us to tell her better than you. What you do, get all these lovers on the air tonight.